All right, and I'm your host, Tess. I'm a functional nurse consultant, and I help people get off the revolving door of symptom management and back into real, vibrant health. And after 30 years in healthcare, 23 of them as a registered nurse, I left the system to help people actually get healthy. And so, what are we going to learn about today? We're going to learn what real optimum health looks like. We're going to explore what our body is doing under chronic stress, and then we'll explore what phase of burnout you might be in. And there was a little quiz that I sent out before the workshop started for participants, and you can go back to that in your email and grab that and take that little quiz to see what phase you might be in. All right. So I'm going to start by asking a simple question, really. How are you doing today? How do you feel? And you can keep that answer to yourself for now, but people ask this all the time, right? But do we really actually ever truly answer this, truthfully? Now, if you were doing great in this moment in time, that means that you may have no symptoms or any complaints. And so when it comes to your health, you may have chronic symptoms every day. And because you have them every day and it's your baseline, you might be great on that particular day at that particular moment because it's not severe, right? It might be just a moderate flare up. And again, you're used to feeling that way. And certainly when you are used to feeling that way, you're not actually in optimal health. And most people don't seek any attention on their health until they have symptoms. And the issue with that is once you have symptoms, dysfunction and imbalance have already ensued. So when a symptom does pop up, we immediately have this urge to take something to relieve the symptom. If we have low energy and fatigue, maybe an afternoon coffee. If we have a headache, pop a Tylenol or perhaps another coffee. It may relieve the symptom, but we're not necessarily asking the question, what is the cause? We may mask it with a quick fix. Then the symptoms will likely return at some point, sometimes worse. We may even grab something stronger for the symptom, move from coffee to espresso perhaps, or something stronger than Tylenol. So even seeking supplements to help our bodies, we figure, well, that might work. It worked for so and so, but not what you're really, you're not knowing what you're targeting. You might go to the vitamin shop, you talk to the clerk behind the counter, or you go to the local pharmacy and find a supplement that you read about online. And these things might help you short term, but never getting to the causal factor, what's going on, what started it, because the symptom is not the problem. What is causing the symptom is the problem. So it's not removing the problem when you're just masking the symptoms. And it could actually be making it worse. So you finally end up with worsening dysfunction that turns into a diagnosis or an illness. And so you may end up going to the doctor at this point. You may start out with some mild fatigue, some gas, bloating, then diarrhea and constipation. And then you take something for the gas and bloating and something over the counter to take care of the symptoms. And it helps for a little bit, but then it worsens and you don't get any answers despite trying to seek them out. So you end up with SIBO, let's say, for example, or dysbiosis, which is imbalance in gut bacteria. But you don't know this because even though you went to the doctor, they told you that all your labs look fine, right? Everything looks great. The tests are normal, but the symptoms continue to worsen, and you continue to self-medicate until finally, over time, you end up back at the doctor. You don't have any answers, but then you have a diagnosis of, let's say, IBS or colitis. So if you had investigated your symptoms before they turned into a diagnosis, back when you were self-medicating for those symptoms, what if you had looked for the causal factor then, looked for those imbalances, found healing opportunities, and took action? You may not have that diagnosis at the end of the day. So this is where I want to present the wellness meter. And if you look down the middle there, it says no symptoms. Okay. And that's, we're feeling pretty good. right? We don't have any symptoms, nothing's really going on. Or you may be one of those people where you're feeling pretty good, your symptoms aren't too bad, so you don't really consider them there. So when symptoms first started, they may not be what conventional medicine deems pathological in nature, which is a disease or illness. And those symptoms may not even point to anything on standard lab values. Therefore, we don't receive a diagnosis. We get that everything looks fine. But then those symptoms persist. And as we move to the right, our health weakens even more until finally we end up with a diagnosis, a medical diagnosis, but only when the internal chaos has caused such an imbalance that we get the diagnosis or pathology, and in some cases, a non-reversible one. And so medical management provides symptom relief with pharmaceuticals, with very little lifestyle interventions such as nutrition or other strategies. So this wellness meter, when looking at it, we have no symptoms in the middle. We consider that good health. Then when we move to the right toward those symptoms and diagnosis, this is the sick care model. This is the way the standard healthcare model operates. And as we move from the no symptoms to the left, we move toward optimal health. And the difference is we've got high energy versus low energy, those first arrows. And then we've got a robust immune system over there on the left, where we've got, feeling sick and run down there on the right. And then cellular protection versus a diagnosed condition. And at the extreme, we've got 100% function versus death. And I know that seems dramatic, but eventually it's true. And so when we're looking at this meter, on the left, we're talking about optimal health, and optimal health recognizes high energy, strong immunity, cellular function. Your body's balanced, you're feeling great. And when we have the sick care model, we have symptoms and dysfunction. We have a diagnosis or an illness, and then we have eventual decline from there. So to experience true wellness or optimal health, moving left on that meter, we're striving for prevention. We're striving for balance, bring the body to balance. We call that homeostasis. Your vitality is robust. We're not just waiting for things to break. Have you ever had a doctor say, well, your lab range, fill in the blank, we'll take thyroid, for example. Um, you know, it's borderline. They say it's borderline, but we'll keep an eye on it. Come back in 6 months. And many times with this conversation, there's not much mention of intervention, what to do about it. We'll see you back in 6 months or a year and we'll recheck. We'll see where it's at then. And that's waiting for things to break. That's the system. And so instead, we want to look at how we can bring everything to balance. And we call this imbalance that's happening as an FDN, metabolic chaos. And that's what causes dysfunction and eventually disease. And metabolic chaos is essentially a weakened state of health. You're moving to the right of that meter, and it's where hidden stressors have caused that malfunction. HIDDEN, we have what's causing those imbalances. Those stressors are hormones, immune system, digestion, detoxification, energy production, the nervous system, and also oxidative stress. And the thing is, we can have imbalances in these areas, but because our body is amazing and it knows how to heal itself, it will try to compensate for those imbalances. And we can go a really long time, in many cases, dealing with those imbalances and our body compensating for them. And it's really a vicious cycle until it just can't do it anymore. And our body was designed to work for us. It's constantly attempting to put things back into balance. And so even if something started in one of these areas, it's going to touch another area. So it could be the cause of or the result of the other area being imbalanced. And that's kind of what this chart is looking at. This is all the areas that are touched by each other. And, there's like a lot of symptoms floating around that chart, but this is kind of what happens. We start to see things get out of balance. And to go into each one of these would take a long time. That'd be more like a 2-day workshop. So what I would like to do is zero in on a major stressor, and that is a hormone called cortisol, because chronic stress is what can set all of these into dysfunction. I just want to talk about stress for a minute. There's actually 4 kinds of stress. We always think of the mental emotional stress, our feelings, our emotions, how we react to outside circumstances. But there's more to it than that. We have physical stress, which could be acute trauma, it could be chronic pain. And then from there, we have biological and chemical stress. And this can be in response to pain or physical trauma, for example. And then chemicals can be either from an external source, even the food that you're eating, or it could be toxins that your body makes. That's the biochemical processes. And our body makes those naturally, but we filter and excrete them. And then, of course, there's spiritual stress. And this is really our life's purpose, meaning when we don't have connection to that, or having no or minimal connection to that which is greater than ourselves. So that's just an overview of the types of stress that we have. So let me introduce you to cortisol. You may have heard of it.
Yes.
And I
Mm,
don't want to give it too bad of a rap because we actually need it, but we don't need it to be activated all of the time. And with our modern society, many times it is. So to understand how this is causing so much chaos, we need to understand the activation of the stress cascade a little bit in our bodies. And I love this stuff and digging into the physiology, but I'll keep it as simple as possible for those that don't love it as much as I do. But our stress response, it's regulated by our autonomic nervous system. And there's 2 parts to that, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. But the sympathetic responds to stress. It kicks off that response. And then the parasympathetic is what kind of slows it down. We like to call that the rest and digest part. So we're looking at the sympathetic when we talk about the stress response in general and what's happening in the body. And when we experience stress, let's say we're running late for a meeting, we hit traffic, we're in a heated discussion, we see a car coming at you when you're crossing the road, so you got to get out of the way. These all lead us into a stress response. Now, in some cases, this is good because we need to respond to that car coming towards us, crossing the street. We must respond to that, right? But the trouble is our body doesn't know the difference between being stressed in a relationship versus saving ourselves or being ticked off at the guy that just cut you off in traffic. So we're a society that lives in high stress levels all the time. We're really burnt out people. So what's happening when we're constantly in this stress response? We have a fire alarm. This is our inner fire alarm. And I kind of just broke this system apart a little bit in a very easy to read diagram here. But when your body senses any kind of stress, physical, emotional, even poor sleep, it sounds an alarm. And that alarm system is called the HPA axis, which stands for hypothalamus, which is the command center in your brain, the pituitary gland, which is the middle manager, and that's also in your brain, and then our adrenal glands. And this is your body's stress responders. The brain notices the stress, it sends the message to the adrenal glands, and then your body gears up to handle it. Your brain, it just notices it, and the hypothalamus sends a signal, and that's the corticotropin steroid, and then that sends the signal to the pituitary. That sends out another signal called the adrenocorticotropin hormone, and that sends the message to the adrenals. So it's really complex. And obviously, you don't have to remember all of this, but just know that adrenaline and also norepinephrine are kicking the stress response into gear from the adrenal glands. And they're secreting cortisol, helping to secrete the cortisol, and then the cortisol kind of keeps it going long term. So just let me just click over the next slide. And so you can think of it as the adrenaline is kind of like your get up and go. It's giving you the signal, and then the cortisol is like a slow burning fire. It's keeping you going longer. Cortisol helps with energy. You need it for energy, blood sugar regulation, and to really kind of kick the focus in an emergency situation, knowing to get out of the way of the car. But when your body's under stress and cortisol is released continuously, then all of those things kind of ramp up all the time. Your blood sugar is increased and things like that. So here's the fire alarm going off, your blood sugar rises, you got that energy surge, and it's not good long term to keep on kicking on because your digestion then slows. You get bloating, you get reflux, constipation, poor detoxification. And it's because the blood is being removed away from your body systems because it needs it for that emergency response, right? For that flight. Your sex drive drops because your body isn't prioritizing reproduction, it's prioritizing survival. It needs to survive. And then other systems are slowing for the same reason. It's all about survival. Blood is shifted away so that you can flight, you can run. Also, it's really important to know and to keep this in mind that cortisol is catabolic, and that means that it breaks things down over time when it's constantly being surged in that way. The body releases energy, and so it's not great when that's happening all of the time. Now, let me just, kind of mention what the benefits of cortisol, because again, I don't want to give it a completely bad rap. We do need it. It's important in metabolizing protein, fats, and carbs. It's important in regulating blood sugar for the nervous system. And it really supports our natural circadian rhythm, which is our sleep and our wake cycle. So we do need it. And it's just we need it at the right time and at the right levels. So the problem with chronic stress when we're talking about this, the fight or flight response was meant to be temporary. Our modern life keeps the alarm clock ringing, emails, traffic, deadlines. We're caregiving. We've got hormonal shifts. We've got environmental and biochemical stress. So your body never gets the all clear. And so too much cortisol really equals burnout, belly fat, mood issues, sleep issues. And then it also causes us not to have enough DHA. And what that is that's kind of like the calming down crew that counteracts the cortisol, if you will. So when you don't have enough, we have poor regulation of cortisol. We also end up with poor recovery and our immune system gets affected. We have low resilience. And so when DHEA and cortisol are in a nice balance, the stress system shuts off properly. And we're able to return to balance and to what we call eustress, which is you're relaxed. But when cortisol is running the show 24/7, the DHEA can't keep up and your body stays in that survival mode. So why does this matter to you? Because our stress response was designed to help us survive, but it was never meant to run full time. And so too much cortisol at the wrong time can leave you feeling, wired but tired. Have you ever felt exhausted, but you're still like going? And that's what we'll look at more closely with your personal wellness meter. And so what I'm going to show you in the next slide is going to help you kind of check in to see what phase you're in for burnout and chronic stress and where your body might be. But let's just take a quick look back at this chart because I just want to mention this again. This is what happens when the body systems are kind of out of sync. And it's not one specific disease. It's a weakened state of function where multiple systems start to struggle and then the symptoms begin to pile up. And it's because everything is connected. Our bodies are beautifully complex. All these symptoms, they're all linked. And the beauty of it is that they're all trying to compensate and help each other out when another area is off. And so our body is constantly trying to create that balance again. We have that innate healing capability. So I just wanted to show that again before we kind of go through these phases of burnout. And so how does our stress break us down over time is really what we're going here. Now there's phases to this and taking into consideration what we just covered about the stress response, and our HPA axis. This is a big part of our body just trying to find that balance. So this graph does a great job in showing how your cortisol levels respond over time under chronic stress and what that means for your energy, your resilience, and your long-term health. The chart was originally created a while back, but then one of my mentors in functional medicine, Reed Davis, made it into a more like a 4 or 5 phase chart. The 5th phase being down here after exhaustion, it is death, and then over here is complete balance or eustress. So first we're going to look at the green section there, which is called adaptation. And this is where your cortisol will rise temporarily the way it's supposed to, help you adapt to short-term stressors, and then your body returns to balance afterwards. So that's once that stress is resolved, okay? Remember that car coming, you got out of the way, takes you a little bit after you realize that you're safe, but you're able to go back to a relaxed state. Your body returns to balance. You feel good overall, your energy is strong, your resilience is high, and you bounce back easily. So this is what we call a healthy stress response. So a healthy stress response is over here on the left. You know, you've got the high energy, good immune function, all the things. So you're on the left of that wellness meter. And then we move into the yellow zone. And this is where, you know, cortisol remains elevated as stress becomes more frequent or constant. And your body's trying to adapt. It's still trying to compensate, but it's starting to show signs of some strain. You may feel like you're handling life, but you're, again, wired and tired. You might crash in the middle of the day. You've got some brain fog, maybe sugar cravings, some irritability. And for some people, they could stay here for years, you know, running on adrenaline all the time. Some people even thrive on it. I know I did for a long time. It makes them feel good. Things like high performing jobs, they thrive on that. It's an adrenaline rush, but it's also a ticking time bomb because eventually, and it's different for everybody how long, but they're going to end up in the orange zone. And this is the compensatory phase. The chronic stress really starts to wear you down. Cortisol begins to drop as your body can't really keep up with the output anymore, and all systems start compensating: your hormones, your digestion, your sleep, your mood, immunity, and you feel exhausted, you're foggy, you're burned out. You may be even anxious or depressed at this point. But the kicker is that labs may actually still look normal here, but you definitely don't feel normal. This is often when people seek out care because they're stuck in this metabolic chaos. They seek the answers from the medical community, and sometimes they're told, again, everything looks fine, you're just getting older, you know, whatever it is. They may even say decrease your stress, but they don't necessarily tell you how to do that. Or maybe seek therapy, which is fine, but it's not necessarily going to fix the root cause, the physical issues going on. So there's no true intervention in standard medicine until a diagnosis or a pathology exists. So as we move into a red, that's when that's happening. Cortisol is likely tanked, you're out of reserves, vital reserve is depleted. Think like your energy and your vital reserve as a bank account. You know, once it's depleted, you can't take any more out. You're overdrawn. You may end up with chronic illnesses, burnout, cardiovascular events, and really deep fatigue can show up here. So your body's just kind of exhausted. You're in the exhaustive phase. It's done adapting. So this is the crash and burn, and this is where disease actually ensues. So there's no more resilience. Everything may feel overwhelming, even small tasks. And by the way, everyone is different on how long it takes going from that late yellow phase there, you know, on that bell curve, moving into the orange and then into the red. Everyone's different how quickly that happens. They may stay in compensatory phase for a long time, or it may not take much time at all. So the goal is to really get back into that green area. Okay, the adaptation phase, and really eustress, completely balanced. I don't think we can ever stay completely balanced all of the time, but it's good if your body can adapt and get you back there quickly. So we want to restore function. We want to refill your reserves and help you respond to life without breaking down. So whether you're in the yellow, the orange, the red, you can move toward a more optimal health situation, but it takes really the right support. You got to give it time. You got to have a strategy because you didn't get to those later stages overnight, and it's not an overnight fix. So the journey is really different for everybody. So going back to those hidden stressors, as I quickly alluded in the beginning, those stressors plus oxidative stress are really the ones that are hidden underneath the surface. And so they don't always show up uh, one at a time or show up clearly or individually. They overlap, they interact, and they disrupt your entire system as a whole. And that's why it's not always about finding one root cause. It's about addressing the bigger picture and restoring balance. And that's where healing opportunities really occur. So some of those symptoms that you might be experiencing: fatigue, foggy, bloated, moody, achy, wired but tired. The root cause might not be where the symptoms show up. And so that's why looking at your whole health picture is key, not just chasing those symptoms. So the good news is you can go from this to that. There are areas that you can look at and kind of focus on to kind of get you there. And really, by starting with the foundation, starting with nutrition and restorative movement, sleep hygiene, mind and body support, and functional testing when needed, by identifying and supporting your unique weak links, you can reduce the chaos and restore that balance so your body can heal, it can rebuild itself, and really start thriving the way it was designed to. And when I work with people, we create something called the Dress for Health Success. And that's a wellness plan that I really dig into, create an action plan, if you will, in each of those areas. And it works for the individual in helping them to explore their hidden stressors. And then again, there's those hidden stressors, just in case you needed the reminder. But before we end today, I just want you to ask yourself, where do you fall on the wellness meter? What phase of burnout are you in? And again, I sent a little quiz that came in your email for the workshop, and you can go ahead and explore that a little bit later. It'd be interesting to see where you are, but after listening, you probably kind of have a pretty good idea. But that's just another step. So let me just kind of get off the slides and come to camera for any questions.